Welcome to today's Explainer, everyone. Grab a seat, let's get right into it. As history and archaeology students, you already know that our research isn't just about sitting in a library reading plain texts or, just accepting the standard narratives at face value. Real historical breakthroughs, they almost always require rigorous object analysis. We literally have to look at the physical artifacts, the actual material of the past, to dig up truths that were intentionally hidden from plain sight. So today, we're going to explore exactly how physical anomalies can unlock entirely lost historical narratives.
But this brings us to a really fundamental question, right? Think about it for a second. How exactly do we make silent historical objects speak? Because, let's face it, objects are born silent. An artifact isn't just going to magically tell us its origin story or whisper its secrets. So as historians, as archaeologists, and as document detectives, we have to ask ourselves how we can use tangible, physical evidence to crack these hidden codes. So, here's our syllabus for today's lecture. We're going to start off by reading ciphers on historical weapons, then we'll jump into a massive master case study on the Voynich manuscript's materiality, explore a fascinating geometric anchor point left by Leonardo da Vinci, and finally wrap up with the paradigm of scientific falsification. All right, Section 2, Ciphers on Historical Weapons. Let's start our warm-up case right out on the battlefield, because it's pretty wild to realize that cryptographic practices weren't just for fancy diplomats, they were literally carved into the everyday military objects of the 15th century. Take a really close look at the physical carvings embedded into the wood and bone of this 15th century crossbow. Now, for the longest time, researchers just assumed these were random pseudo-Hebrew characters, designed purely to look cool and impress people. But through rigorous object analysis, historians realized something incredible. These characters can actually be deciphered phonetically in reverse. When you read them backwards, they reveal a hidden German phrase, Hab gut Lieb, hoch Herze, which basically translates to have good love, high heart.
And we know for a fact this kind of cryptographic carving wasn't just decorative. If you look at military manuals from that exact same era, like this incredibly detailed one illustrated by the Hessian engineer Johannes ben Gedans around 1450, you see that military engineers and apprentices heavily relied on encrypted trade secrets. They were actively safeguarding their intellectual property. We're talking chemical formulas, advanced mechanical designs, the whole shebang, keeping it entirely hidden from their rivals.
Moving on to Section 3, the Voynich Manuscript, focusing specifically on materiality and dating. We're going to take this exact same principle of physical object analysis and apply it to one of the most famously unsolved documents in the world. We're going to ignore the bewildering text for a minute and focus strictly on the physical object itself.
As archaeologists and historians, we absolutely have to anchor our theories in physical data. Guessing just doesn't cut it. And here is where the detective work gets so exciting. Notice how the radiocarbon dating of the Voynich manuscript's actual, physical parchment places its creation exactly between 1404 and 1438. Now that timeline perfectly overlaps with the life of the 15th century Venetian engineer and military doctor Giovanni Fontana. And guess what? Fontana was an absolute pioneer in creating mechanical cipher disks. This exact physical and temporal alignment is a massive first clue for us.
And that brings us to a groundbreaking interdisciplinary theory known as the Fontana-Lüth hypothesis. What this theory suggests is kind of mind-blowing. It proposes the Voynich manuscript isn't actually written in a traditional linguistic language at all. Instead, the physical document is basically a mechanical geometric protocol. It was likely generated using a rotating cipher disk, exactly like the ones Giovanni Fontana engineered and documented in his encrypted military treatises. The actual position in space is what encodes the data, not the drawn symbol itself.
This totally changes how we look at the mechanics of it. Imagine this as a frozen table, mapping the physical properties of the Voynich glyphs to specific angles on a 16-sector disk, clicking forward in 22.5-degree increments. So, based on visual form similarity mapped to a standard medieval abbreviation dictionary, Capelli's lexicon, an O shape sitting at 0 degrees means et, while an A shape at 45 degrees translates to cum or cura. What it outputs is a grammar-free list of Latin abbreviations. That is absolutely perfect for a doctor or a military officer who only needs the critical keywords to understand a sensitive message.
But it gets even wilder. This hypothesis treats the manuscript's strange variations as actual mechanical realities. You know those weird, distinct glyph variants like the different styles of 8 shapes? They might not be different letters at all. They could be physical, mechanical control commands telling the user to rotate the cipher disk forward or backward. And what about those famously bizarre, repetitive strings of text throughout the Voynich? Well, the hypothesis posits they're actually acoustic drum signals used for military communication. The rhythmic repetition literally is the message.
All right, grab your notebooks because Section 4, Leonardo da Vinci and the Physical Anchor Point. We are about to take this geometric cipher method and apply it to a blind test on one of the most iconic artworks in human history, Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper.
Welcome to an advanced lesson in historical cryptography via the object analysis of a painting. During modern restorations, it was documented that Leonardo drove a literal physical metal nail directly into the masonry of Jesus' right eye. Now, was that just an extreme stylistic choice? Absolutely not. This undeniable architectural anomaly acts as the precise geometric anchor point required to operate a rotational cipher right on top of the fresco itself.
By utilizing that exact physical anchor point in the brickwork, the decryption methodology follows a very rigorous 4-step mechanical process. First, you measure the vector angle outwards from that nail hole to a specific significant element in the painting. Second, you process that angle by aligning it on the 16-sector Fontana disk we talked about. Third, you translate that sector into a Latin abbreviation. And finally, knowing Leonardo's famous habit of mirror writing, you read the extracted sequence in reverse.
What emerges from this process is just a masterpiece of hidden engineering. The visible painting gives you the grammatical story, right? The biblical drama, the emotions, the postures. But the invisible geometric angles drawn mathematically outward from that physical nail hole provide a totally hidden keyword commentary and Latin abbreviations. It's brilliant. The geometry supplies this secret inner monologue, while the visible scene provides the outward context.
Da Vinci was basically using the refectory wall not just as a flat surface to make a pretty picture, but as a multi-dimensional data storage medium. In this one massive construct, painting, complex theology, and mechanical cryptography all seamlessly merge into one. It perfectly shows how Renaissance polymaths viewed art and engineering as entirely unified disciplines.
Now, moving on to our final section, the paradigm of falsification. To conclude our introductory lecture today, we really have to talk about the scientific method in history. Because let's be real, coming up with a brilliant, mind-bending hypothesis about crossbows, the Voynich manuscript, or Da Vinci is only step one.
True historical and archaeological validation requires rigorous, hard-nosed testing. For the Last Supper hypothesis, that means conducting incredibly high-precision 3D laser scans and photogrammetry of the Milan fresco just to verify the exact angles radiating from that nail hole. For the Voynich manuscript, it means securing expert paleographic verification of the Latin signs against actual 15th century northern Italian usage. We absolutely have to test the physical data.
And the independent researcher behind this whole hypothesis, Lüth, has basically thrown down the gauntlet. He states that historical research is all about open data and rigorously testing hypotheses. He says, "I am a person who opened a door. The tools are ready, the data is open, the invitation stands." He is expressing an absolute willingness to have his theories properly falsified by the academic community. And that, everyone, is the absolute gold standard of real, rigorous research.
So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to investigate on your own as you continue your studies. While analyzing these physical anomalies, from a carved bone on a crossbow to a rusty nail hole in a global masterpiece, unlock a completely new, hidden chapter in Renaissance history? Or will the rigorous, scientific method of object analysis eventually prove it to be just a magnificent, elaborate illusion? The physical evidence is out there, just waiting for you to decipher it. Thank you for joining today's Explainer. Class dismissed, and keep questioning the silent objects around you.